Hello again, Netrunner fans. Willing Dunn here, and I am back for part 2 of my 2014 retrospective. This time I'm going to be talking about the top 10 runner cards of the year, as well as some general trends within the runner side of the game. And at the end of the video, I'm going to be giving my pick for my favorite data pack of the year. If you watched the first part of my retrospective, you saw that I thought that 2014 was a very good year for the corporation, but there's been a lot of good things for the runner that have occurred throughout the year, and I think that we've seen that runner has become a lot more diverse and more interesting as a result of the releases this year. My first major trend of the year is the introduction of new and unique economy options into the runner card pool. 2014 brought us a lot of new ways to generate credits, but almost all of them were difficult to use or kind of narrow in scope. A good example is the rise of the prepaid voice pad decks. Prepaid wasn't released during 2014, but I think it's fair to say that it became popular largely in 2014, and this was because of the release of other events that worked well with this card. Another unique example is Nasir, whose economy ability is difficult to use, certainly requires that you build your deck around the idea of using his power, but we've never really seen IDs generate the number of credits, especially in the way that he does. Speaking of Nasir, my second major trend of the year for runner is sweet new IDs for everyone. Nasir was a great new option for shapers, has given us a lot of things to play around with. Quetzal has given us ways to be aggressive in kind of new and especially early in the game ways that we haven't been before. And things like Silhouette have given us a kind of unique style of criminal that's very different than the Andromeda Gabe sort of style that's been really popular for a long time. Another big change up for runner this year has been unique new ways to deal with ice. From Quetzal to the dogs to the cycle of stealth breakers to Sage and other AI type breakers, we've seen a lot of different ways to challenge our existing breaker suites. I think we're finally at a point in the runner metagame where it's reasonable to not play Corroder, or reasonable to not play Gordian Blade, or reasonable to not play the kind of standby breakers that we've been using for most of the game's history. Before we get into the list, like with the Corp list, I'd like to give an honorable mention. And I actually have two honorable mentions for the runner list. The first honorable mention card is Astrolabe from Up and Over. Shaper has always wanted a all-purpose and kind of generally good console to use, and I think really only like Toolbox was maybe that, but it was really too expensive to be including in most decks. There was a lot of decks that didn't really care about playing like Dinosaurus or something like that. So I think having a all-purpose, really strong console for Shaper, such as Astrolabe, is a really big deal. And I don't think Astrolabe is mind-blowing or especially great, but it is a really nice option for decks that just need that extra MU and would like to be able to draw a few cards in the process. I think that this is fit really well into a lot of the Kate decks I was working on, and it's just generally fit into decks that didn't have a console, but kind of could make use of that extra MU and like the ability to get to draw a few free cards throughout the course of the game. My second honorable mention is actually one of the dogs. It is Cerberus Lady H1 from All That Remains. I think all three of the dogs are pretty strong, but my pick is Lady for the best one, just because within Shaper, there are lots of barriers that we want to be able to break efficiently, but we don't really have a very good barrier breaker. Snowball has seen a fair amount of play throughout the course of the year. I've seen people play Battering Ram. Inti was reasonably popular at one point or another. All three of these breakers have some serious issues. I think Battering Ram's pretty clearly the best one, but the 2MU aspect is a huge deal. Cerberus Lady H1 gives us an option to be able to break high strength barriers without a whole lot of issue, and it's only 1 MU to install. It's pretty cheap, and it's in a faction that already has good recursion like Clone Chip or Test Run or Scavenge. So I think that Lady is going to have a good role in quite a few different Shaper decks, just because it's one of the best options for dealing with barriers in faction. And the big fact that Lady just runs over one of the most popular pieces of ice in the game, Eli 1.0, really cheap to break Eli. I think that's really what makes Lady one of the best barrier breaker options within the Shaper faction. Getting into the list, we're going to start with number 10, and this is Overmind from Honor and Profit. Overmind isn't an especially great breaker in my mind, but I felt like it deserved a place on the list because of how many different decks and different ideas have been generated using this card. We have seen so many different deck lists pop up all over the internet involving Overmind as one of the core breakers, and the fact that this synergizes really well with things like E3 feedback implants, or also synergizes well with decks that aren't planning on running a whole lot, they're just trying to make the right run at the right time. I think Overmind has had a tremendous amount of influence on deck building throughout the year. Now, that said, I'm not exactly sure that the card has been proven. I'm not sure that we've seen a deck with Overmind really rise to the very topmost tier, but I do think that people are going to be interested in this card in the future, and the appeal of this card is definitely there in that it's an all-purpose solution to any sort of thing you're trying to get through, or if you want to play your bomb event card like Maker's Eye or something, it's really good for that type of play. Moving on to number 9, we have Switchblade from Up and Over. Switchblade is the biggest reason to consider playing a Stealth Breaker suite, in my opinion. Stealth Breakers, generally speaking, are just a little better than their non-stealth counterparts. Switchblade kind of turned that on its head, being a lot more effective than your average Sentry Breaker. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, Switchblade breaks any number of Sentry subroutines. Sentries tend to be dangerous because of the number of subroutines they have. So the idea that you can break all of the subroutines for 1 credit, really strong. And the fact that it also gets +7 strength means that you're going to be able to match strength on all but a handful of sentries. That said, Switchblade requires an incredible investment in stealth, and I think is my favorite thing about the design of the card. The fact that you have to have 2 stealth credits to really make it do what you want it to do makes it really hard to play in virtually any deck that isn't focused on stealth. So I really like the idea of having breakers in the game that require you to do some kind of funky things to get them to work, but when they do work, they're absolutely incredible. And I think Switchblade is a really good example of that. I'm not sure we've seen the card proven quite yet, but I have seen a lot of people trying it in even the most popular decks like Andy, and I think that we're going to see Switchblade continuing to be popular into 2015, mainly because of the break any number of subroutines thing. You're just going to be able to run over so many problematic sentries with that. My number 8 pick is Inject, also from Up and Over. This was a card that I was pretty skeptical about when it initially came out, and having now played with it a little bit, I have absolutely changed my mind. This card is very, very good, especially in noise, or decks where the programs aren't what you're trying to draw early in the game. Generally speaking, Noise and a lot of other Anarchs can afford to just lose programs early in the game and then later get them back with things like Clone Chip and Deja Vu. And the cards that you're really trying to find, especially early when you're getting set up, are not programs. Things like Aesop's Pawn Shop or like the 2 cards I just mentioned, Clone Chip and Deja Vu. This lets you find economy cards as well as just other kind of engine cards in your deck and gets critical programs into your discard pile. You might actually want them there for some of the reasons I just mentioned. So I think Inject is a great card draw option for Anarch, and I think it filters out kind of the nonsense and gives you the cards that you really need. The fact that it's cheap to play, a lot of times it's free, or sometimes it even nets you money, is another pretty critical aspect of this card. All around, I think this fits really well in a low econ style of Anarch deck, especially in noise. With the Anarch big box right around the corner, I anticipate Inject remaining relevant and staying strong for the conceivable future. This card really surprised me, and I think I thought it was going to be good, but wow, is it really, really great in the right deck. My number 7 pick is Lucky Find from Double Time. I include Lucky Find mainly in conjunction with Prepaid Voice Pad, which was actually released in the previous year. But this card, I think, has been one of the big emerging forces in alternative runner economies. One of my big trends for the year was that runner has gotten economy options that are different than the sort of desperado data sucker oriented thing that's been popular for so long. And Prepaid and I think Lucky Find are a big reason why we've seen these new economies take traction. I think prepaid oriented economy has proven itself as an effective way to generate a lot of credits. And when Lucky Find came out, there were a lot of people trying this card out in basically every deck conceivable, right? Like I saw prepaid everything throughout the year. Eventually, I think we've settled that Kate is the best way to do it, mainly because Kate can use her ID ability to pay less for the prepaid itself, and then there's also a bunch of other ways that you can utilize her ID, and it's nice to have the burst economy from things like Lucky Find to keep you going and be able to set up your rig and eventually make runs. Lucky Find is a great economy card on its own. It gets way better with prepaid, and I really, really like the design of this card because of the influence cost. I think cards that cost influence, neutral cards that cost influence, are a really good way to explore powerful areas of the design space, especially cards that are such instrumental economy options like Lucky Find. It's just a big burst economy card. You know it's going to be good in any deck because everybody needs economy. But the fact that it costs 2 influence makes you really have to think, is this what I want to play? And probably you don't unless you're using something like prepaid. So I like that design, and I like that we've seen this alternate sort of economy rise in Runner throughout the course of the year. Moving on to my number 6 pick, we have Security Testing from Honor and Profit. As much as I just got done talking about the move away from the desperado data sucker sort of economy thing, security testing is a big reason why we should keep playing that way. Security testing has been an absolute monster in Andromeda and in a bunch of other decks that want to run all the time. It's just such a good way to stack on 2 credits to your already efficient run, where you're triggering Desperado, where you're triggering Data Sucker, maybe triggering some other stuff as well. And then you're also getting 2 credits out of the run. Gives you a nice economy option in decks that are prone to running a lot. And I really, really think that Security Test's not access effect, like the fact that it replaces the access, is a lot of times as much of an advantage as it is a disadvantage, especially against Jinteki, where it can be really dangerous to access certain cards. Having access to security testing to replace those accesses and still allow you to use your Desperado, to use your Data Suckers and whatnot, is a really big deal. Security testing is just such a great economy option for decks that are running all the time, and I think it's pretty much here to stay, at least in some quantity, in the decks that are looking to make constant runs and utilize Desperado and Data Sucker. My number 5 pick is also a criminal card, and it's also from Honor and Profit. It is Legwork. What can I say about this card? This card is Maker's Eye for HQ. I actually think that it's a little better than Maker's Eye, kind of in a vacuum, because if you're able to fire off a legwork at an opportune time, I think it's going to give you a lot better chance of scoring. than kind of a random Maker's Eye will. The fact that legwork gives the runner the opportunity to strike at the corporation at a time where the corporation can be really weak, which is kind of early in the mid game, maybe 5 to 10 turns into the game, where the corporation player has drawn a lot of cards but hasn't like scored agendas or done any card filtering or that kind of thing. Legwork is just an absolute bomb if you can hit them at a time where they're likely to have more than one agenda in their hand. And legwork's also really good at tracking down that one agenda that you know is in their hand for whatever reason. I don't know what else I can really say about this card. It's the type of card that needs to exist in the game. I think it's designed really well, the fact that it's just the same as Maker's Eye. This card's great. It's been played in a lot of different decks, not just criminal decks. 2 influence lets you play it outside of faction really easily. I think this thing is a bomb from here until the end of Netrunner. We're going to be seeing legworks show up. My number 4 pick is also an economy card, and this is the Supplier from First Contact. I put this card so high on the list because it lets us do something that we just can't do very easily otherwise, which is to reduce the cost of resources that we want to play down to the table. Now, it also works with hardware, which is nice, but we have some other ways to do that within the game. The resource thing is absolutely incredible, especially given how good a lot of resources are and how resource-centric a lot of different economy options are in the game. This just works so well with cards that are already really good, like Daily Cast, Earthrise Hotel. Anything that costs some number of credits, it's going to be reduced by 2, and it's going to come into play and be excellent. You can host cards on this just for a click. The fact that it's a connection makes you able to tutor it up with Hostage if you need to. I think that this card is here to stay. We've already seen quite a few people trying to build decks in a variety of factions with this thing, so I'm pretty convinced that the Supplier is going to be a big card going into 2015, and I think that this is just such a good way to do economy options. It's in a faction that has a lot of ways to use it, but it's such a general use card that you're going to be able to use it in other factions as well. But at the same time, it's got only resources and hardware that it works for, so you're going to have to kind of skew your deck towards those to get the maximum value out of this card. I really like this card. I think that it's not quite been proven yet, but I think it soon will be. My number 3 pick is Cash from the Spaces Between. Unlike a lot of other cards on the list, Cash is an extremely narrow card that is probably only going to see play in Noise for the foreseeable future. That said, this card has single-handedly reinvigorated my interest in Noise and I think general interest in Noise. And this card is just honestly unbelievable in Noise. It's just such an incredible powerhouse. Noise gets so rich with this thing, makes so much money. You play it for free with Cyberfeeder, you trash it to Aesop's Pawn Shop, and that's just like the easiest thing you can do with it. There's even ways to get even more credits out of this card. Man, is this card good. It's so good in Noise. And even though it's a lot narrower than a bunch of the other cards on the list, I put it so high up because of just how much it's done for the Noise archetype and the Noise deck. So I really think that Cash is here to stay. Cash Noise is going to be the way to do Noise for the foreseeable future. And I think even when we get a big box of Anarch stuff, you're going to start most Noise decks with 3 copies of this card. My number 2 pick is also from the Spaces Between, and this is David. Now, David, there are a lot of reasons why I put it so high on the list, so I'm going to try to quickly go through them. First of all, I think David is a pretty unprecedented icebreaker, especially within Anarch, because of the fact that, well, first of all, it's not an icebreaker. It's just a program that happens to break ice. But second of all, it has the ability to fight the highest strength ice in the game, something that I don't think Anarch is particularly inclined to do. right? Anarch is more about reducing the strength of ice. This is something that's actually good against really strong ice. And it's a very high influence card, so it's going to be hard to play outside of Anarch. So I think giving Anarch a big tool that no other faction has access to like this is a really good move to making Anarch a lot more playable as a faction. But I also think that David is on the upswing in the general metagame. I think that we're going to see an uptick in high strength ice, especially with cards like IT Department, with the rise of Blue Sun playing things like, Curtain Wall or whatever, and a big box of Wayland cards that are hopefully going to reinvigorate more Wayland Glacier styles. So I think David has proven itself somewhat already, but I anticipate David being a monster card in the upcoming year, and I think that having access to something like this to keep the strength of ice in check is a really, really good thing. The fact that this isn't an icebreaker is kind of interesting as a novelty as well, and I really like that it's in Anarch, a faction that has kind of been notorious for having good icebreakers that are just used by the other factions, right? Like the fixed strength and whatnot. So I love David. I really think David is on the upswing, and I think we will see more David in 2015. We've come to the end of my list, and it's time to announce my number one runner card of 2014. That is Keyhole from True Colors. This card, I think, is pretty unprecedented in Netrunner because it gives the runner a way to single-handedly defeat the corporation, right? We don't even need to access agendas in order to be able to beat them with this card. We can just run them out of cards. But at the same time, it also makes it pretty easy to access agendas if you just trash them off of the Keyhole and then run their archives. The other thing that's really insane about this card is that it's kind of self-snowballing in that you can use it to trash the cards that the corporation needs to defend against it, and then eventually they're just not going to have the options they need, and you can just use Keyhole until they lose the game. Now, I like the design of this because there's such an obvious and easy solution to it. Put a bunch of ice on R&D, right? If you can just get ice in place on R&D, it's going to be hard to use Keyhole very often, but that can be really difficult to do, and I think that in the future we're going to see even more decks that are based around Keyhole with maybe some ice destruction or just all around trying to use Keyhole over and over and over. So I think that while this card has seen a lot of use in 2014 and has been a big bomb in this year, I think I'm putting this so high on the list because of its potential for next year as well. I think that Keyhole is the type of card that is always going to be a staple in the game because its power level is virtually unparalleled. And the fact that it's really strong against a lot of decks in the current metagame, I think Keyhole is particularly good against Jinteki because you don't have to access the cards, right? You can just look at the cards. You're not worried about getting hit with Snare or Shock or other nasty stuff. You can just take care of the thing and then deal with it later, or maybe not even deal with it later. So Keyhole is just such a monster. I don't see this going away. I see this only increasing in popularity throughout the year, and that's why it's my number one pick card for 2014 on the runner side. Well, that's going to do it for the runner top 10 list. I'd like to quickly go through the data pack breakdown of the list. We saw a tie between Honor and Profit and Up and Over, both with 3 cards between the list and the honorable mention. We saw 2 cards from the spaces between, both of those very high on the list though, 2 and 3. And then there were 4 other packs that all had a single card. So quite a bit of variety in the data packs on the runner side, a little bit here and there from all of the packs in the year. Speaking of packs, the time has come for me to pick my number one data pack of the year. And just before we begin, a couple quick notes. I didn't want to include Honor and Profit because Honor and Profit's pretty clearly the best release of the year. it's got more cards than a data pack. It's not really fair to compare with the data packs, so I'm not going to talk about Honor and Profit. The other thing was I wanted to pick a data pack that was balanced. I didn't want to pick one that was really favored on one side or the other. So, for example, Double Time was definitely in my short list, but I decided not to go with that one because of how Corp favored the pack was. The pack is absolutely insane for Corp, but it's only got a handful of playables on the runner side, so I wanted to pick a pack that was balanced between the two sides. This was a really hard decision, and I would say actually harder than picking the top 10 list on either side, but I decided to go with Up and Over. Up and Over is a great release because it has a little bit of good stuff for both sides, and it has a lot of weird and kind of uniquely powerful cards on both sides. On the runner side, we're getting Inject, which made my list. We're getting Switchblade, which made my list. And we're also getting Astrolabe, which was on my honorable mention list. So that's a card from each of the factions that made my list in some way. And then we also have Origami and Fester, both of which are kind of uniquely powerful cards that you might be able to play in the right deck. Same things may be true with Autoscriptor. Trade-In, I think, maybe has some potential. Kind of a weird, funky card. Angel Arena, that kind of just sucks. On the Corp side, we have cards that made my list. Both Blue Sun and Architect both made my list. We also have some pretty interesting cards like Peak Efficiency, Ashigaru. I think Mamba, to a certain extent, has some playability. Reversed Accounts, we've seen a lot of people talking about how insane this would be with Moosh and Notion, but I haven't actually seen anybody be willing to spend the influence on it. I think Changeling has some potential, given some of the stuff that's in the next box, and Reuse as well as Hades Fragment, both pretty situational cards, but they're really strong in their own right, and I think Hades Fragment is my pick for the best of the fragments. It certainly has the most potential in my eyes. So Up and Over is my number one data pack of the year. There are lots of other good packs that were contending with this one. And in fact, I'm going to put up a list here that shows a combined list of my two lists, my runner and my corp list, how many of the cards appeared in each data pack. You see that Up and Over was actually the highest one under Honor and Profit. So that was another thing that kind of pushed me towards picking this pack. Well, that's going to do it for the video today. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please press subscribe and the button that looks like a thumbs up, and I'll see you again pretty soon for some more Netrunner stuff.